Hey everyone, it's Natalie Bencavanga, and welcome to Facts Over Fear What the Flock edition. We had a little tiny hiccup, a little technological blip, but we are back for round two, and we're going to start this from the top in case anybody missed any of the important things that my wonderful friend here, Ben Camacho, was sharing. He is an investigative journalist based in California. So, Ben, I just want to give a quick synopsis around the impactful investigative work that you've been doing. So, everyone, think about this for a second. What if you attended a protest and your license plate ended up in a police database, one that ended up being searchable by agencies from hundreds of miles away? So, newly obtained records revealed that at least 11 California law enforcement agencies used the Orange County Sheriff's Department's Flock Safety License Plate Reader Network to search for people connected to anti-ICE protests. Now, cops across the Golden State accessed these automated license plate reader systems at least 145 times to track protesters within the span of a year and 7 months. Ben, when I read your report here on Substack, I was truly blown away by the audacity of this. Can you talk a little bit about what led you to this investigation?
Yeah, so this investigation really started after I received the Orange County Sheriff's Department's Flock Network audit log. That's a series it was about a dozen or so logs that made up a period of 19 months, spanning from 2024 into this year, I believe. And so I should say that when I received these logs through a source, I couldn't even actually open them on my laptop because they were like there was so much data in these logs that my computer, Google Sheets, and like another program that I tried using, Proton Sheets, were actually refusing to open all of these logs because they were so massive. And they're massive because they are actually 7.6 million different searches by different California police officers within the past 19 months. And so the story originated with receiving those logs. I had to actually ask one of my web developers to actually build me a website that reads the logs for me just so I can even start analyzing this data. And so, that's all back end work that it's not pretty work that, other journalists on the live stream are familiar with what goes into all of this type of stuff. And so, but I kind of started searching through them, and then it was very quickly I found these searches that were cited as reasons for these searches that were labeled as protests or protesters, things like that. Yeah.
Just you guys, so you know, Ben is an independent journalist, so you may want to throw him a few bucks so you can help him with the offsetting of the costs of the website, because I know you're not going to ask for that yourself, but what you're doing is really meaningful and important. And this is exactly why we need independent journalism, because legacy media that is now basically owned, bought and paid for by the billionaire class, they don't want us looking into these kinds of records. So the fact that you took this upon yourself, and building a website ain't cheap. So if you can help our friend Ben out there, just a little bit, that would be great. I wanted to talk a little bit about what some of these logged searches were. So what you came up with was that you saw things like ICE protest or simply protest, and how this raises serious questions around whether surveillance technology that they claim they're using to, solve crimes and catch the bad guys is actually being used instead to monitor constitutionally, or at least it used to be constitutionally protected First Amendment activity. Can you talk about that juxtaposition between what you're seeing these cameras and these databases being utilized by and for, as opposed to what they're claiming that they're using it for?
Yeah, before I expand on that, I should preface by saying that this is the story that I wrote is really just a snapshot of the data. It shows a very really actually small use of uh the other 7 million searches that are happening. And so,
Mhm.
but I'm only one person. I don't actually know all of those other 7 million uses and the implications of those. And
Mhm.
privacy experts also do flag pretty much just the general use of automated license plate readers as being problematic. And so,
Mm.
but to your point, I think that, just the fact that it's stated so plainly in these logs that I'm assuming police departments were, somewhat trained and told by Flock and its representatives that, things are logged and you can see the history of searches through these network audits and other types of audits. But just the fact that cops are quite literally spelling it out for us in their reasons for searching. Um, I mean, really like the audacity of that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Keep in mind that the context of all this is federal agents um, taking people from the streets, from their homes, from their work, and these are community members who are going out and resisting that, or at least speaking out against that. And so, um, I think to me it kind of highlights um, a a federal and state slash local, effort that California cops like to say doesn't like exist, or they're not helping
Mhm.
in immigration enforcement. But if they're protecting ICE agents or federal agents by way of suppressing protests against the actions of those federal agents, then I arguably that is collaboration. They're
Yeah.
ensuring that agents are able to go into the streets and to homes and to workplaces and take people and
Mhm.
put them in detention. And so I think it's really just like starting to unravel this narrative that cops in California aren't involved in immigration enforcement, and I think they actually very much are.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And, I also find it really fascinating how quickly communities are adapting this and adopting this use of these cameras all around the area. Here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, we have a shit ton of flock cameras going up. And I don't even know if our community is fully aware of what is going on. And I was recently traveling. I was in South Carolina and I was walking the beach with my husband on our last day of vacation in Hilton Head. And I said to him, I was like, do you remember this giant surveillance camera on the actual beach? This wasn't there, right? And my husband was like, no. So I went up to a local lifeguard and I asked her about it. And she said that they had just put it up this morning and it was coming from the sheriff's department in the county. And so I made a video about it, just posing these questions, Ben, like, what is this surveillance technology being used for? Why are we okay with third parties being contracted that are housing this data? And who can see us? Who is accessing this? We have children on the beach. Like who is looking at this footage, right? And so I ended up hearing from the county. A reporter reached out to me because I guess the sheriff was pretty pissed off that I made this video and it had gotten back to them. And he claimed that they don't work with Flock, which wasn't true because I looked up dflock.org and they have like 1,800 cameras that are Flock oriented there. But what really bothered me, and this is the part I want to bring to your attention, was that he said, oh, this isn't Flock technology. This is facial recognition technology. He was saying it as though that was somehow better. So, can you talk a little bit about what exactly is being picked up by all of these different cameras and what is going on in terms of how they're storing this data?
Yeah, I mean, that's so funny that he posed facial rec as something better than Flock. Stick with me. So yeah, I mean, what's being picked up by flock cameras is for sure license plates,
Mhm,
but actually they're pretty much taking photos and filming at pretty much every moment that a vehicle goes by. And so
mhm,
they're not just taking down the license plate number, they're actually filming everything that goes on around this vehicle, which is just another way of saying they're filming anything.
mhm,
And so, uh, car type, person, color of person's skin, color of person's shirt, bumper stickers, et cetera. The person on the corner in view of the flock camera waiting to cross the street, et cetera, et cetera. All of that is getting picked up in the footage that these flock cameras are taking. And
Hmm.
I guess the easiest way to think about it is like when the camera sees a license plate, that's when it knows like, okay, action, and then it starts filming there. Uh,
Hmm.
and that's kind of like the trigger, I guess you could call it. And so, uh, to your question about how this data is being stored, I mean, I don't know where Flock, like if they have their own
Hmm.
servers outside of Amazon or anything like that, or but it is all pretty much stored within Flock's infrastructure, whatever that is. I don't really know what that looks like, but it's owned by Flock, and it's maintained by Flock. They like to tell, police agencies that police themselves own their data or cities own their own data. I think that's kind of misleading because I guess technically the contract does say that, but if the contract in the next clause or the previous clause says that Flock can, uh, anonymize parts of the data and then actually do anything they want with it, such as train their AI or machine learning models, or distribute to third-party vendors, which this exists in Motorola's contract. Oh, sorry, and Flock's contract.
Hmm.
Then I think like at that point, it's kind of weird to say that the city does own its data.
Mm. If you're just joining us, I'm Natalie Bencavanga. You're listening to Facts Over Fear, and I'm with Ben Camacho. He's an investigative journalist, and he's just exposing like a huge underbelly of what is going on with flock cameras here around the nation, but in particular in California. Ben, when we're looking at this data, because like I just shared, Pittsburgh in particular, which is my neighborhood, there's a lot more flock cameras than I think people realize. In your estimation, or the work that you've done around this topic, what is the situation like in California? Because I think California is a great example of it's happening there. It's happening everywhere when if it's going on because it's such a populated state. So what can you tell us about the extent of flock cameras or cameras like flock in California?
They're everywhere, uh,
Okay.
up and down the
Great.
state.
You're welcome, everyone. Sleep well tonight. Sweet
Yeah,
dreams. You're being
uh,
watched.
and I know this because, like, I've seen, like, the names of random cities that I've never heard about, like, I didn't even know
Mm.
there's a city called Nevada County or something like that, that's a city in California, apparently, yeah, I mean, this is all in the data, this is how I know this, and so
Sure.
they're all over the state, the Central California, Southern California, LA Greater, Northern Cal, and all the way to the top, yeah.
Do you think they're using this data and saying, "Hey, we're looking at protesters now"? Do you think this is intimidation? Do you think they're trying to crack down on people, going to protest? What is the reason for looking and logging for protesters under these cameras when it is theoretically protected under the Constitution?
I mean, that's a great question. I think, and this is something that I wrote about towards the end of my article.
Hmm.
Uh, mentioned the president's NSPM 7. It's like a national security presidential memorandum. Sorry if I got that wrong, but it's NSPM 7 for short. And I think that was signed in September of last year, and it essentially is a memo that criminalizes dissent and acts of resistance as
Whoa.
defined by Trump and his team themselves. And I think it's essentially an order instructing law enforcement across the nation to go after, the quote unquote undesirables
Mm.
by definition. And so I think looking at it through that lens, like really, to me, it's a fascist hammer that's coming down across communities all over the country. We saw what happened in the Prairie Land case where somebody
Mhm.
who had been involved and moved a box of zines from one location to another, received 30 years of prison sentence.
Yep.
And so to me, that's spelled out pretty plainly. And police are equipping themselves with the tools that makes repression easier for them and harder for us to resist against.
If you're looking for more information on the Prairieland situation, I interviewed his sister, the person you were talking about, for my Substack just, I think, about a week or so ago. And we
Okay.
talked exactly about what is happening with her brother. And just to your point, it scared the hell out of me just listening to her speak about what they did to him and how people don't seem to understand the level of overreach right now by Trump and his regime. And so, one of the striking parts of your reporting to me was just how these surveillance systems are really being adopted with very little public debate.
Mm.
Like I said, here in Pittsburgh, I don't think a lot of people are even aware that the city council approved a lot of these things. So, why do you think oversight failed to keep up with this technology?
I think it's the same as like what's happening with like AI moving at lightning speed is that the laws and policymakers are always going to be behind technology, especially and technology that specifically empowers police and other state actors.
Hmm.
The regulation, the will to go against a company that is um, extremely profitable, but also extremely useful for police to, you know, for for police across the country to use, just isn't there from policymakers. Even I think Rob Bonta had put out a memo a couple years ago, pretty much asking police in the state of California to make sure that they're compliant with state law. He had to put out these guidelines, and I think I linked that in a previous article. He had to link these guidelines or lay out these guidelines for police in California because there were reports coming out that that police were struggling to stay in compliance with state law. That was a few years ago at this point, and the records that I have are a few months old. I think they stop around February. Like that's the last date on the log. And even up until then is like when I'm seeing like problematic things on there. And just to clarify, I didn't see stuff this year that police were searching for protesters. It was stuff from last year and the year
Hmm.
prior. But you still see vague things, which Rob Bonta's memo was basically saying like, hey, you need to be specific. You need to have case numbers attached to this. You need to have the officer who's conducting these searches have their name on these logs, and they just don't. They simply don't.
I think that's what's so disturbing about all of this is like this is happening also during a time where our average senator is, I think, 64 years old. And so there's this just general disconnect between the way the world is in this moment and the way we're legislating for the world. And so you see that, and then mixed with, like you just said, all of these other points of intersection, it is no wonder that we're sort of caught up in this dystopian hellscape, known as the United States of America right now. But as we wrap this up, I mean, you have done such incredible work around this subject and so many others. What are you going to be looking into next? What's the next part of this narrative, this conversation that you can share with us?
Yeah, so I have a story coming out either next week or the week after, taken from the same set of data
Hmm.
involving the Anaheim Police Department, and it's I can't say more than that.
Okay.
But I'm essentially taking like a deeper look at this data
Okay.
and seeing what police across the state of California were using or tapping into the Orange County Sheriff's network for. And aside from that, I also have the logs for the Santa Ana Police Department, which, for those who are familiar with my work, know that I'm very much digging into them all the time, and also going to be reporting on what they're using Flock for as well. And yeah, I think that kind of lays out the next couple months for me. Yeah.
Well, that sounds very important, very meaningful. And I look forward to having you back on the show to dissect the data and to discuss your work in depth. As always, I so appreciate you being in conversation with me. Ben, if people want to support your work or learn more about it, besides subscribing to us here on Substack, where can they go?
Yeah, inadvertent.news is where I'm published by Independent Reporting. I'm also the managing editor at the Southlander at thesouthlander.com. And yeah, I would say keep up with those two. That's where I'm very active right now. Thank you.
And don't worry, guys, he's going to be making reels on Instagram soon as well. So you'll be able to follow his reporting there.
I thought we were off the record when we were just kidding.
I'm just teasing. No, I appreciate everything that you're doing and the incredible work. This is challenging times to be a journalist and to try to get your work out there. So anything that you guys can do to help amplify what Ben is doing is always appreciated. Thank you so much, Ben, for being here. And until next time, everyone, please take care of yourselves and each other. Bye.
Thank you.